welcome to Film 2014. I'm Antonia, Quirke, standing in for Claudia, who has all our best wishes as she looks after her daughter. We're live, so get in touch. The details are on screen now. Coming up on tonight's show. Code breaking with Benedict Cumberbatch and Keira Knightley in The Imitation Game.
What if only a machine can defeat another machine?
Now, if a computer were asked to create a quintessentially British film, it might well generate a World War II setting, a triumphant yet heartbreaking story of a national hero, and it would inevitably star Benedict Cumberbatch and Keira Knightley. Already tipped for awards glory, The Imitation Game is the story of Alan Turing, the gay pioneer of computer science who broke the Nazis' Enigma code and single-handedly shortened the Second World War.
What did you do during the war?
I worked in a radio factory.
What did you really do during the war?
Are you paying attention?
What is it that we're really doing?
We're going to break an unbreakable Nazi code and win the war.
Oh.
It's an incredibly moving story about Alan Turing, who was the man who broke the Enigma code in the Second World War.
I wanted to tell the movie like a mystery, because that's how he was to me. I didn't know much about him, but his achievement shortened the war. He saved millions of lives. He's the forefather of the computer, and is one of the big unsung heroes, I think, in the world.
I read an article probably about 5 years ago, and remember reading it and just sort of finding it totally shocking that I hadn't heard of him and that I didn't know who he was and I didn't know what happened to him. He was gay, and he was prosecuted for being gay and then chemically castrated by the government.
To me, this movie is about outsiders. It's about those who didn't fit in, and those who have new ideas and new thoughts, and I wanted to celebrate that.
Have you decrypted a single German message?
My machine will work.
Sooner or later, you will make a mistake.
He's very uncompromising. You get this sort of crystallized version. I am who I am, you know, and he's very unapologetic about it for a large space of the film. So it was really important to me to humanize him as he learnt how to work with other people, how to move out of isolation and be comfortable with being different. But the tragedy of his life, I think, is borne out in the fact that every time he did try to do that, the world knocked him back.
You could help us, but you won't.
You will never understand the importance of what I am creating here.
I'm just a mathematician.
You've got more secrets than the best of them.
I want to be a part of the British film industry. I'm very proud of the British film industry. It's a very, very small industry. And what we export, really, is period pieces. So, you know, I mean, naturally, if you work here, that's sort of the field that you're going to go back into.
I think we're fascinated with our history, and I think we're very good at curating, saving, explaining, forming narrative. And we all wanted to do it. We all knew what an important story it was and character to portray.
Everybody wanted to be a part of this in order to sort of say, look, this is an extraordinary man, an extraordinary story, and he deserves to be better known than he is.
Danny, as Knightley says, this is what we do best. What do you think it is?
I think the film takes this very complex character and it makes him the hero of this great British, big, broad crowd pleaser, you know. I think it has to simplify him. It has to make a few compromises here and there in order to do that. But the film that it wants to be, I think it is that film. The film it wants to be is the film that families will gather around on Boxing Day for time immemorial, you know. But the thing is, we're film critics. We're not going to be asked around at Christmas. I mean, that's the problem. So I don't know if this film is actually directed at us.
Tim, you have been tweeting vociferously about this movie since you saw it about a month ago. Tell us why.
Well, I don't want to be the cantankerous one. We should say, you know, Benedict Cumberbatch has a really smart stab at this role. I really like Keira Knightley in the film as well. But there is something pretty important missing here. I mean, this is the Alan Turing story sort of in his own words, in fact. He narrates the movie. Cumberbatch gives us this opening voiceover. And yet we're kind of excluded from a pretty major area of his life, his private life, any sense of his interior life. And I think that's a strange trick to have missed on the filmmaker's behalf, actually, because it means that we don't really get to to understand what makes him tick in that way, and doesn't fully do justice to the ways in which he was really punished unfairly and brutally for being gay.
But it makes it quite clear that his sexuality is a key part of the Turing story. It
does, but there's this whole business in the film about man and machine, and the Imitation Game is a bit like the Voight-Kampff test in Blade Runner or something. It's how do you tell a man apart from the machine, and one of the key ways to do that is, you know, is what human beings desire things. We have cravings, we have yearnings. The film backs away, really, from showing all of that. I basically feel as though they came some way towards it, and it should be the whole final act.
I just think, you know, I just think that you know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of old drafts of this script. They're on the hard drive of Graham Moore, the writer, and Harvey Weinstein, the very famous, if not slightly notorious producer of this film. And each of those drafts will have presented a slightly different Alan Turing. And they'll all have tried to wrestle with the idea of how do you take this quite jagged and contradictory character and connect him with a mainstream audience.
Is there any chance of them doing that? This is what, you know, like to call commemorative stamp cinema, you know, and it has such rigid heritage movie cliches that I think the main problem with the film is an awful lot of what you see, which is actually true, smacks of fiction. For example, the moment where we discovered that Churchill stepped in personally to intervene so they couldn't shut Turing down. You are watching that thinking, I'll have to check that when I get home, because you don't fully believe it. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think one of the problems is that Alan Turing himself was this very shadowy figure, and actually the challenge for Benedict Cumberbatch, who I think is terrific here, to be honest, is he has to build this character out of thin air, because we know about Turing, but there's very little, we don't even know what Turing's voice sounded like. So the historical record is so foggy, and so many bits of the real Alan Turing, who was this incredibly complex character, have fallen off in the translation, that, yeah, it feels, that border between truth and fiction feels a little bit shady. But I do think Cumberbatch is fantastic here. I think it would have been very, very easy for him to do a variant on Sherlock. Lots of people would have expected that. Yeah. Lots of people would have wanted that. And in fact, he's not. He's like the kind of eccentric British great uncle of Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory, or like a boarding school Pee Wee Herman, and I find that quite compelling. You know?
We don't really have much time. I just feel that, I don't know, for such a vital and interesting, essential life as Turing's, I just hoped for something a more creative and inventive film.
A few more risks
would have been fantastic.